We've seen in Python how we can pass functions to other functions, just like we pass parameters like integers and floats and booleans and other objects to functions. And we could also return functions from functions, right? So this is what we meant when we went over functions as first-class citizens in Python. So here we're going to continue that conversation, and we're going to talk about decorators, which is a syntactic sugar that Python allows us to use to get the same thing done. So let's talk about an example. So here we have my decorator function. This is an accept a function, and you don't have to call it function. You can call it whatever you want. If you call it callback, you can call it apple, you can call it whatever. Whatever you call it here, you have to call it when you invoke the function as well, right? So just to show you that the name is not so important, as long as it's not a keyword, of course, but that's what we're going to be passing to it. We're going to have a function within a function right now. We're going to have a message before we invoke apple, this function that we're passing in, and we're going to print a message after. We're going to print a message after we invoke this function that we're passing in. And at the very end, well, we're just going to return this function that we just defined. Why? Because that allows us to basically invoke that function whenever we want. We have a reference to it. That's what we're going to return, but we're going to invoke it whenever we want, and that's what's going to happen. So what is this function that we're passing in? Well, it's this one. It's this go fast function, and we're going to just print something, printing going really fast, and that's what's going to, that function's going to be passed in here, and that's what's going to happen when we invoke it here. We're going to say going really fast. So how does that work? Well, we have this invocation of my decorator, which is that function. We're going to pass the function, which is go fast. Notice how we're not passing the parameter, the parentheses like this, because that would be invoking go fast right away. We're basically saying, hey, just pass the reference to this function. And this is basically going to be stored in here. Well, what's going to be stored here? Well, we know it's going to return this function called wrapper, right? With a reference to this function, which, you know, was passed to my decorator. So that's what we're going to be holding in this my decorated function. And at the very end, that's when we can invoke that function whenever we want. Based on whatever condition, we can say, hey, my decorated function, parentheses, well, that means go invoke that function. Well, what function? Whatever we got from the wrapper, which that is the wrapper function, right? So let's run this and see what happens. And we'll see that this is what happens, right? We have some function, some string that gets printed before. Then we have the string from that go fast method getting invoked or getting printed. And then we have the string after the function. So we've done that before. We know we could do that. That's not a real surprise to us. So let's see what happens when we use the decorator to do exactly the same thing. So here we have the same thing. However, what we're changing here is we're going to put this annotation, this at my underscore decorator. Well, this is the name of this function. And what is it doing? What's the way to read this? Well, this is saying, hey, go fast is a function that's going to be passed to my decorator function. Well, where is that? Well, it's right up here. We defined it right up here. That's what the func is going to be referring to when we pass it through here. So it's going to have the same thing is going to happen. We're going to have some print statement before we invoke that function, some print statement after we invoke the function, and we're going to return the wrapper. What's the wrapper? The wrapper is just this function called wrapper, and that's what's going to happen. So then we can invoke that whenever we want. So that makes it the following. That makes us do the following, which you could argue it's more concise. It's more readable. It's more maintainable. We're not passing anything right here. It's just go fast. What's go fast? Well, we're going to invoke that. But this is doing all the magic, right? This is doing all the syntactic sugar that we're talking about, which is connecting this go fast as the function that's being passed in, and so on and so forth. So that's what allows us to just do something like this, and we'll get the same exact results. So what does that look like? Let's run it. And we'll see that that's exactly what happens. Same exact result. So all this to say that we know what was happening before underneath the hood, but now we get to see how we can kind of clean it up and do this with the decorator. right? This is a built-in feature in Python. It's more acceptable. It's considered more Pythonic. It's more concise. So if you see it anywhere else, you know exactly what we're doing with decorators. I hope this makes sense.